And one thing that's really interesting in all this is that Damian Lillard does not have a no trade clause. So he can't just veto any potential trade. And he doesn't have that much leverage when you think about it. Obviously, he wants to be traded to a preferred destination, but the Trailblazers can say, hey, we want to send you to the Pelicans because, realistically speaking, the Pelicans probably have the best packages available.
Let me put you on game.
Let's move into our next topic. We have some NBA news and notes. Damian Lillard, aka Dame, aka Dame Dollar, has allegedly, according to Henry Abbott, he allegedly desires a trade and will request a trade in the next few days.
Yeah.
Dame has come out and said that news didn't come from him, but he does want to see changes to the roster because he doesn't feel like they have a chance to win a championship. And he's right. But he also said that he hasn't made any firm decisions on what his future will be. Interesting news for our New York-based fans and listeners. I know we have a lot of those. The Knicks are listed in that report that Dame denied, that they are a potential desired destination. So I wanted to ask you, how fast are you packing RJ Barrett's bags?
I mean, he is Canadian after all. He's not like a true, he's not a true American.
He's not a
so
true
I gotta
New
be
Yorker.
that loyal to the boy. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I was looking up trade scenarios, and we have enough. But just like how we got fleeced,
what is enough? Before you get into your point, what is enough from the Knicks here for a Dame trade?
So, if we were to really put all the chips on the table, we would say Barrett, Toppin, Quickly, Knox, Robinson, and 2 first-round picks for Damian Lillard. I think there's enough somewhere in there. There's like a guy that could maybe be worth Lillard, but even if you actually add up the sum of all those parts, I don't think that anything there is enough to compensate for Damian Lillard. Just like when you think about what the Knicks traded for, what the Nuggets got for Carmelo Anthony, never really amounted to the value for Anthony, or what the Rockets have gotten for James Harden, or what the Pelicans got for Anthony Davis. Like it really remains to be seen. Draft picks and young players are just kind of assets, and they don't really actually move the needle into making you a more competitive team unless you're able to really unless you get lucky, essentially, and one of these guys pop. But the sure thing and the sure product is never what the allure of potential is. And so I don't see that as being enough for a Trailblazers trade, to be honest. And one thing that's really interesting in all this is that Damian Lillard does not have a no trade clause. So he can't just veto any potential trade. And he doesn't have that much leverage when you think about it. Obviously, he wants to be traded to a preferred destination, but the Trailblazers can say, hey, we want to send you to the Pelicans because, realistically speaking, the Pelicans probably have the best packages available for a Damian Lillard trade. And if that happens, would he actually be happy over there?
I would hope they wouldn't do that, though.
You would hope, but when versus, like, it was interesting because when it came to guys like James Harden who didn't have as much team control, and guys like Anthony Davis who didn't have as much team control, like these guys were going to be out no matter what. The franchises kind of said, okay, where would you like to go? But if it's a guy like Damian Lillard, they might not have as much incentive because he's under contract for like the next 4 or 5 years with a player option. So yeah, he's under contract through 2025 with a player option. So the Blazers don't have to move him to a preferred destination. That's just something they would do if they saw a situation that they liked.
Yeah, I think they should, though. That's the thing about, because I think that Dame has dialed in with that team, and I think he's really shown his loyalty to the team. I think that he could have left multiple times in the face of what's ultimately been mediocrity for the
Mhm.
team. Like, I don't think there was ever a season where the consensus was the Trailblazers were a real threat to win the championship.
Yeah.
I think there's been a couple people that have like hopped out the window, like Charles Barkley, and said it. But I think that for the most part, we've pretty much said that they were most likely going to be like a second round at best and out team. They made the
Yeah.
conference finals, but for the most part, they've never really had a real chance. But Dame has stuck by them and he's led the team. So I would hope that the organization would look at that and say, all right, we want to create a favorable situation where we can give you the best chance to win. It's like KG in Minnesota. Like, he's given this organization everything he possibly could. Like, it's not his fault that they've come short, or that they've come up short in the playoffs. Like, especially against Denver, like, he was lights out. He literally couldn't have done anything more, but they still lost. So he's in
Yeah.
a situation now where it's like, I've given you everything. So maybe if I am on the way out, like, maybe you can at least get me to a situation where I have the best chance to win later in my career, and you can also get assets, like a Golden State situation.
Yeah.
Like, if that could work, I think Golden State has a 7 and 14 in this year's draft, as well as Wiseman and Wiggins. So that could potentially be a deal.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know if I'm taking the New York deal if I'm Portland. I think that RJ is probably the only player out of all of those players that I really see as a long-time starter in the league. So yeah, it's tough. It's a tough situation. I wanted to ask you, what do you think it means for the NBA if Damian Lillard ultimately gets traded?
Um, I think it kind of exemplifies this new generation that we're in. It's just another amongst several examples of when a superstar, it's a superstar driven league. And when a superstar is unhappy, they basically have the power to do what they want. And the power is in the hands of the guys that make the make the shots and that are clutch and that do put their life and blood on the line, sweat and blood on the line, and tears a lot of the time to just try to be excellent and be great. And I would just hope that Dame goes to a market that isn't already saturated with titles, but it seems like that's probably where he'll end up being. And there's all this talk and speculation about him going to the Lakers. And if he goes to the Lakers, I don't, that team would be the favorites, but at the same time, I don't, they don't have not nearly enough to actually make a trade compelling. Kyle
Yeah.
Kuzma and some, future 20, 30 draft picks are it's
And
like
Alex Caruso, like, it's not
on a
enough.
sign and trade, that's not even close to being enough. Um, the Clippers, they have a couple pieces, but they already gave up everything they could for Paul George. And so the big markets have kind of sold out in hopes of championship or bust. And the Lakers have been championship, Clippers have been bust so far. And so the only teams that really have like the pieces to get them are teams like, the Boston Celtics, the New York Knicks, Philadelphia 76ers, Miami Heat to a lesser degree, and the Golden State Warriors. Other teams in the league, I'm sure, have assets and packages, but I'm pretty sure Dame probably wouldn't want to play there. And so it just comes down to who can make the best deal. And or if the Trailblazers front office says to themselves, okay, sorry, CJ, we want Ben Simmons. We think Simmons paired with Lillard could be a better force for the Western Conference and be better suited. And they maybe jump on something like that. But otherwise, it like I said, it's kind of just the status quo of the league. It's a superstar driven league, and superstars need to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder what it means for player loyalty. Because I think that outside of winning situations, Dame has been like we said, Dame has been one of the most loyal superstars in the league without that team success. But there does seem to be a disconnect between him and ownership. I think it's being reported that ownership believes that they have a team that's title worthy, And Dame is basically saying like, nah, we need to make some moves. So if that disconnect continues, like I don't think he really has much of a choice. Like if he really wants to win, like and ownership isn't gonna try to make those moves to do so, he's just gonna have to request out. But it's interesting. I think Dame has taken on that title as one of the most loyal players in the NBA as well from his side. And you saw it with him beefing with Paul George a little bit, talking about, y'all boys switching teams, running from the grind and all of that. And I've seen people just asking him like, Dame, like, please run from the grind. please, please get yourself to a winning situation. And it looks like he might do that. So he kind of feels like the last Mohicans in a way of players that are just kind of battling
Yeah,
against, you know, super team culture or whatever you want to call it. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that
yeah,
wherever Dame does go, it's going to change the landscape of the NBA because he's such a
yeah.
talented
And sure,
player.
what?
Yeah, he's a incredible shooter. So I think that he'll have a long career in terms of how long he can be effective at what he does, regardless of how like huge that contract is. So it'll be interesting
That's,
to see where he
that's a
does
good
go.
point.
He's going to completely change the fortunes of a team. I saw Jalen Rose say that he should go east. So that makes, if he does end up on a Philadelphia, or if he does end up on a lesser team, like if somehow the Bulls were able to get enough breadcrumbs together, he could completely change the fortunes of a
I mean,
franchise. So,
don't you guys have enough assets to pull that kind of trade?
uh, not without giving up like Zach or Vooch. I mean,
Hmm.
I would give up Vooch in a Dame
Yeah,
trade, but I don't think that. Yeah, I don't. I think the idea is like Zach and Dame would be really great together offensively, so you would want to put them together. So Portland is probably going to ask for Zach. They're not going to take, you know, Kobe White, Laurie Markkinen, and picks for Damian Lillard. So, there's not really much that we have. So, you know, I don't know.
yeah,
I don't think the Bulls are a destination. But I'm just saying, just in terms of like a team on that level, a team that was on like barely on the outside looking into the play-in, like he could potentially change a franchise like that, or he could elevate a franchise that's like a Boston, like you said, that's where they're a second round team at best right now, as currently constructed. But if he were to get there without giving up too much, he could potentially put them, into the conversation of being a championship contender because he's that kind of player. So
yeah,
regardless of where he does go, it's an important conversation to have about Dame because he's going to, wherever he goes, change the landscape of the NBA.
yeah. And back on that player loyalty question, I think that so many guys talk about player loyalty, but ownership loyalty is probably the biggest determining factor of how successful a team can be. And ownership has to be able or willing to open their pockets. I was listening to an interesting conversation some weeks back, and they were talking about Allen Iverson and his situation and how the owners saw, okay, Iverson is getting to the NBA finals on his really bad roster. We're making all this money in playoff revenue. Why should I spend more money to do the same thing and potentially not win? And
Yeah.
if you're an ownership group that's about making profit, you're going to look at what happens during a season and say, don't really feel like spending more money just to try to win a championship if there's no guarantee, and if I'm not going to be
Yeah.
able to actually reap the benefits of that reward and just get less profit overall. And versus like, so, and you contrast that with guys like the Clippers and Steve Ballmer and how they're willing to put their money on the line to get results, and to their credit, they actually do get results. And so you wonder if that Portland team is willing to spend the money, not just on Dame and CJ, but on other potential free agents, or make it an attractive free agent destination. And it seems like they just haven't been able to. They haven't been able to make up for what has been lacking. And so ownership and their ability has such a huge influence on what a potential superstar's career can look like. And if they're not willing, it's going to be quiet, and they probably won't be able to win a championship in spite of ownership. We saw that happen with LeBron. We've seen that happen with several different teams and their superstars. You know, maybe if it's thinking about like an Indiana Pacers back in the day with Reggie Miller, and just other teams that just haven't been able to get over that championship hump.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of owners out there that are content with just getting to the second round because the profits are relatively similar to winning a championship for them. Like if you look at those Portland home games, they're packed out, especially in the playoffs. So because of, you know, how electric Dame is and how, you know, that team is good enough to draw in that kind of crowd. So like I could see a lazy owner just being like, oh, my pockets are full. Like who cares about actually trying to push to get to that next level, like you said. Because I think we've seen it with a lot of teams. I think I even saw it with like the Bulls. Like they were famously cheap. We was out there selling draft picks for cash at one point in the second round. Jordan Bell was supposed to be a Bull. We sold him for cash though. So I was like, yeah, I think even just like looking at like Derrick Rose, I think that they even didn't know that Derrick Rose was going to be as good as he was. So they were just like, oh, wow, we're good now. Great.
Yeah.
So I could definitely see a situation like that with Portland. And I mean, you're a Knicks fan, you know, so across from being a Bulls fan, like you understand like what having bad ownership is like.
Yeah.
So
the Knicks, the thing about the Knicks is that Dolan is willing to spend money, but nobody wants to take his money. We got the opposite problem. We can attract, you know, we got the glitz and the glamour, but we got, you know, a very a character as an owner, to say the least, that has, you know, that has repelled superstars from getting to the team. So, but in recent years, that seems to have been less of an issue. So I just hope he continues to just stay out of it and let the basketball minds do their thing and just be quiet.
I hate the media sometimes. I also wanted to say like about these rumors, like the Knicks don't really have to do much work in terms of like pitching to free agents because the media does it for them every time. Like whether it's true or not, every single like superstar that wants to leave their team or decides to or is a potential free agent or demands a trade, like ultimately the Knicks just somehow end up in the mix. Like, yo, I want to, you know, it's alleged that like, oh, I want New York to be one of the teams that I'm going to go to. Or like, meanwhile, like outside of this year, maybe last year, they were a total dumpster fire. So it's like what the PR department is doing work. Cause I don't know, some part of me really doubts that Dame was just like, yeah, New York, that's where I want to be. Like, it just doesn't really, outside of the team success, like it just doesn't really make that much sense to me for him. You know, but as the world turns, you know, it's death, taxes, and the Knicks potentially getting a big time free agent. Those are the only things guaranteed in life.